This is Alan Samry.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, so it's a big, grand title, and most of the librarians kind of have all of these things, to some degree. We'll get to that, trust me. So, and it is true that most of my family is here now, so there's just more and more damn Yankees every time. But as all of you know, who can resist, right? So, where to begin? So, this is an abbreviated list of all the fine librarians here that have served in Fairhope. And this is just a partial list. This just lists predominantly the directors and their assistants when there were some. Also, I need to point out right from the get-go, and this is really important, is that the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation ran the library. They paid the people to run the library. So I just want to be clear that, and I'll get to some more details about that, but it's important to know when it started, it was the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation, or the Fairhope Industrial, sorry if I don't know all those acronyms for their organizations. So this is just kind of a glance for you all to see all the people that are involved. And so, of course, this is Marie Howland. She's the first librarian. That photograph on the bottom left is her at 50. And that's her above in Topolobampo, the community that she went to with her husband in Mexico. She was, of course, the first Fairhope librarian. It was her collection, it was her collection that started it. The Pines is where she lived. I tried to associate people and their places, or people in their homes, because I'm interested in historic development and historic preservation, rather. And so this is the site of the first library known as the Pines, which is, if you're looking at the old Fairhope Library on Summit and Magnolia, it would be to the right, okay? And I'll have some pictures to give you a little bit more bearing, I think, as we move along. And obviously, it's long gone. The room, and I call it rumor, I guess it's more folklore. You know, everybody sort of talks about her being a nudist, and there were nudist colonies here. I guess the nerd in me never found any written evidence of it, and so I'm a bit of a skeptic about it. Not that she wasn't a nudist, but just that, you know, by the time she got to Fairhope, she was in her late 60s, so. Just, you know, I didn't have to say anything. You all formed an image in your mind. Okay, so at the very top of this is a Fairhope Courier from 1899. And it says, somebody wrote on it, it says, preserve, right? And so this is sort of the motivation for my talk, is that I want us to preserve a lot of the information that I've included in my slides, because it's obviously important to Fairhope, it's important to Single Tax Corporation, and it's important to the library. So, and I'm going to read a brief quote, and this is from Marie Howland in her home, but before it became the library. Again, 1899. Let me get to this page now. She says, "Mercury in the Pines has not reached more than 3 notches. The thermometer hangs on my desk in my library, where there are 4 windows and a long glass door, and there is no warmer room in the house." It sounds very idyllic until you realize that that room is full of books, and it's full of windows and glass. Okay. So again, this is a courier that we have. This is fabulous too. This is the first catalog that they formed. This is the first catalog of the entire collection. It's dated from 1902. So they sort of worked backwards. So when they got this catalog and filled it in, they filled in all the books from the original collection. And there were 1,662 of the Howland collection, Edward and Marie Howland's collection that they brought here. Plus, in two short years, there were 764 more volumes added by Fairhopians, or Fairhopers, depending on what you prefer. And they were all donated books. So from everyone from E.B. Gaston to a tourist passing through. And it's an alphabetical index. So there may have been a list, but at the time, only Marie Howland knew where to find a book. She calls it a great convenience to the patrons of the library, as well as an indispensable aid to the librarian. Just on the right is just talking about the collection. I'm not sure if that's the women's club that's on the bluff, that was on the bluff, or is on the bluff. Not positive. But these are the pages from the catalog that we have upstairs, in addition to the rest of the catalog. So, first library was in her home. Second library is here. And I've had you'll see in a minute, the difference here. I believe this is the first picture because there's no overhang, there's no entryway, there's no covered entry, and there's no sign that says it's a library. That's a little bit of my guesswork, but I feel like that's potentially the first picture of the library. Let's see. I wanted to mention, I love the letterhead, Fairhope Public Library. This is Marie Howland's actual note about some paint that was being delivered, of all things. Sounds very trivial, but really significant when we see we've got her signature, we've got the letterhead, all good stuff. And she references the Bayboat captain, Captain Powell, about, Captain Powell knows how to handle all these things, which he probably did. Okay, these are just also some more primary documents about the women's clubs. Okay, so just about all the librarians involved in these women's clubs, and there were multiple clubs, they all had a yearbook. And it's sort of like what I'm doing right now. You give your time, you give your efforts, you give your home. If you're Marie Howland or other people in the community and they would talk about these particular subjects. And the men were included in the women's club as well. And that's another thing that's important. I need to kind of go backwards a little bit, is that a lot of women came to Fairhope, in my opinion, because it was one of the few places where they were treated equally in a lot of cases. They were allowed to serve on the Fairhope Industrial Board. They were allowed to serve with the single tax community, and did. Marie Howland was on the board. She had a say, she had a vote, when back then a lot of women did not. Okay, so here's the I believe this is the second picture of the library, because we've got this overhang and we've got the sign here on the front. And so I think it's somewhere around 1909, 1910. I've had a lot of people ask me and tell me that this is a black person here. This is a person of color standing outside the library. I'm not convinced of it. I know the single taxers early on they excluded people of color, so it makes sense that he would be outside, but it looks more like a shadow than it does, maybe in the developing than it does a person of color. This I just thought was cool. It's like just a writing tablet, the cover of a piece of stationery that also includes, underneath it is a bunch of Lydia Cummings writing, which I'll show you in a second. Just some library rules, because we're librarians. We have to, darn it, we have to have a few rules over here on the right. And so this is Lydia Cummings, and she had, like Marie Howland, an entire life before she got to Fairhope. And I think that's important to stress, that a lot of the early librarians did so many other things before they even got here. It's really, truly amazing. This is one of Lydia Cummings' books, and she was really into physical fitness And she produced this book, and she thought comfort was important to women. So this was like wasn't a fashion thing, it was a practical thing for her. Like, why are we wearing all these cumbersome things? Why shouldn't things be more relaxed and comfortable? And also she thought that women should be in shape. She was also a music teacher. She was a public school teacher for a long time as well. Born in 1850. So she got to Fairhope when she was 50, or 50-ish, I guess, 51. And she was recently married to Samuel Cummings, who were a power couple in Fairhope because not only were they involved in the library, but they were also involved in the founding of the Marietta Johnson Museum. Okay. And it's cool that she's in her own book. I meant to, that's her. And so this is just a sample of some of her writing. Her script is very identifiable. It just has when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's her writing. But I had done some research with her in the past, though. This is the first addition to the library. And again, as my preservation mind's working around it, I'm like, well, where? So her house would have been over here somewhere, but there's really that I can see nothing over there. So it's just, I guess it's kind of lost. Maybe it's lost to history, maybe not. This is Lydia Cummings over here on the bottom right. This is a picture of the Baldwin County Historical Society, their first meeting, 1923. And the organization's still going today. They meet not quite monthly, but they meet at least 3 or 4 times a year. This is her marketing picture for her first book, A Brief History of Baldwin County, that she co-wrote with Martha Albers. It was the first book that was written on the history of Baldwin County, so up until then, nobody put anything down about the history of Baldwin County, so it was really significant, and they both knew when they wrote it that it was just the beginning. They never intended it to just sit there. They expected people to challenge it and write more about them, and of course we have. Also, I want to mention Lydia was on the board of the library already. So this is, this would have been mid-1915 maybe. She was already serving on the board. She wasn't the librarian yet. Oh, I take it back, she was. She was. So Mary Heath Lee, I guess when I started, Catherine mentioned, kind of what got the bug in me. Part of it, when I was doing my research, another bug arrived, and I was like, why don't we have pictures of these people? It really bugged me that we didn't have pictures. Because it wasn't like, photography was rare, and we had Stuart the picture man, who photographed near about everything. And then I thought, well, because, I hunted high and low for a picture of Mary Heath Lee and came up, empty, nada. And then I thought, well, maybe her family had these pictures, and it was just never. The Courier really wasn't publishing a lot of pictures then, and if they were typically landscape pictures, or outside buildings, those kinds of things. So anyway, that just sort of got me just gave me one more challenge, I guess. This is just just another piece of letterhead. This is her writing, and this is just the front page of her journal. So we have her journal for about 4 years at the library, plus another off and on up through 1948. So really a great piece to hold on to and protect and digitize at one point. We want to do all those things with time. And again, I mentioned historic preservation, and so who knows this place? What is it? Yeah, it's the Haven Resale Store. It's also Mary Heath Lee's house. And she lived in the house with her daughter, and her daughter was the assistant librarian. And it's on the National Register of Historic Places as the Lee House, built in the early 1910s. I'm not sure exactly when. So anyway, and she was also a poet. That's important. Most of the librarians early on were either artists or writers, or they were all creatives as well as librarians. Oh, back up too. Mary Heath Lee also was the first professional librarian, so she had a degree in librarianship when she arrived. She was the first one. The others were certainly fabulous, but a lot of the records say that she kind of raised it up a notch. She's the one that kind of straightened up got it to an actual catalog where people could actually find things. And this is just one of the library's annual reports. And these things are rare. And I feel like because of the connection between the library at the time, still owned or still operated by the Single Tax Corporation, and I'm assuming connected to the Courier, these things were, printed up like a professional document. So, I mean, this isn't a typical report you'd get, even from a public library reporting to their state. So, also wanted to mention that in a couple of years from now, in 1925, they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the library, and the Alabama Library Association conferenced here in Fairhope, and it was, the meetings took place at the library on Summit. So all good stuff. Okay. So I call these the lean years, and everyone knows why, because of the title on my slide. Again, when you look at I don't have any primary documents from them. Well, I have a few. I have one cool one that's coming up, but I don't have any, there's certainly no pictures of them. And at the time, the Courier wasn't publishing, really. I mean, when you look at the Couriers from the Depression through World War II, there's just not much. There's not many pictures at all. And I don't know, I can't attest to why. Haven't investigated that. I just assume that it was money, as it generally is. And so, we can attest to the money because up here it says Martha Albers, and the stationery's hacked out, and it says Bertha Mershon is the new librarian. But I love this plan. That's the layout of the library. This was 1936. So again, a little treasure. Got her handwriting. It's her map. It's got the stationery. All great stuff. And I would suspect most of you remember the library later than 1936. So it's a little snapshot for people. Let's see. So this is the library after the second edition, which is this edition on the south side. And that was in 1925, just before 1925, so just before they conferenced. This is this same picture, except it's from a different angle. This is actually would be taken, I think, near about where Marie Howland's house would have been. So if you can kind of imagine, you can see where the porch is and everything. So kind of next time you drive down Summit, you'll kind of see a little bit of an open area. There's a house further back on the street. But I also point out that this was the Marie Howland window that was made and installed after she died. And it's upstairs, if you want to look at it, on the second floor of the library, right as you get out of the elevator. It's just another picture. Thought that was cool with the flag. And so now we get to Anna Braun. And if you want to know more about Anna Braun, walk through the library, because her art is everywhere. But like art, sometimes, it might be right in front of your face and you don't see it. I'm guilty of that because I work here, so I don't always, oh, well, that's just sitting on the wall there. But but she has some items hung in the children's section. There's one right by the copier. There's one back in one of the nonfiction study rooms. And I suspect you'll find more than that, but that's a few of them. Anyway, she was an author and illustrator before she became a librarian. And this is just some of her artwork. This is a picture of her when she was a librarian here in Fairhope. Let me go back to that. So this is sort of, I love this picture because it connects my Clay City tile research with the librarian. So this is where Anna Braun lived when she was a librarian. And her studio, this is on the back of the second floor. So even today, well, it was recently as last year, she still had the backyard was a beautiful wooded area, and I can just imagine her, sketching some of her animals back there. I just like that picture. I came across this picture, and then I was doing an interview with the folks who live here, and then I just made the connection with the fireplace, and then somebody confirmed it for me. So, sort of like, just meaningful to me. Okay, Mrs. Roland Car. She has the distinction of being the second longest librarian in Fairhope. And she served, you can see, from 57 to 72. And this is just a group shot inside the library. Again, I haven't seen many pictures inside the library. So, I mean, these are things, I mean, I didn't live here then. Many of you may have. So you may remember, you may go, oh yeah, I remember all that. That's cool. I hope you do. This is her as well, and I'm not sure if this is her assistant, Joyce Antonarella. I'm not sure about that. I invited Joyce. I wanted to talk to her. She still lives here, but she declined. Don't know why. So this is a Southland sketch from Walter Overton, and it talks about the museum inside the library, right? If people remember the museum in the library? Okay, cool. I have some information on that as well that I found out potentially, or maybe you all already know, but where most of the stuff went. But it went to the museum in Fort Morgan it said temporary loan. And I have an inventory a partial inventory of the items. And I'm not sure, yeah, so but it moved many years later after Miss Carr, I think. So these are just pictures from some scrapbooks upstairs. Again, more records of what's been happening at the library over the last 117 years. Just past the anniversary, we opened April 18, 1900. That was when Marie Howland officially opened her home to the public, because again, it's the Fairhope Free Public Library. Okay, so this is the photo that I wanted to just kind of point out. April 16, 1964, the board talks about the transfer. The transfer to the city of Fairhope takes place officially May 1st, 1964. So that's when the ownership changes hands. Or the operation, I should say, not ownership. This is just a picture of Cummings Hall coming down. I've heard lots of people have told me stories about the basketball games there. And I thought it was interesting that I had read back when I was looking at some of Lydia Cummings' books. The second book she wrote had the instructions from Naismith on how to play basketball. So I felt that was very fitting that my suspicion is she brought the game of basketball to Fairhope. Just a shot, this is a shot of the book drop. And this is from 1966. Postcard of the library, 1969. This man here has the distinction of being the only lead male librarian in Fairhope. And he served an interim. His name's Jack Cromwell. And I know you all think, well, you're a male librarian. Well, I'm like, he was another like ghost, like, okay, well, is there a picture of this guy somewhere? Can I find him? Well, I did find him. And by now there was lots, you can see the couriers, like, it was booming with pictures now. And then, so Miss Carr retires, and we have basically Frances Black, who was fresh out of grad school. I don't even know if she's completed grad school when they hired her. And she immediately dives in, and I think her sort of, not claim to fame, but she really developed, her focus was the children's library and the children's librarian, and, you know, developing books and collections. And Miss Carr, there was, when I was reading back in some of the records, it was basically saying that prior to Miss Carr, it was kind of like a single tax club a lot of times. Like, they were kind of treated a little bit differently than some of the other folks that would come in. And Miss Carr kind of, I feel like it sounded like she changed that. And then it changed even more with Miss Black. And I think because she was the first, she's the first truly young person to run the library. And so I think her enthusiasm was probably very, very visible. And it was, because she won Outstanding Woman of Fairhope in the bicentennial year, 1976. These are just some clips. And she was a mom, but she had a short term. She was only here for 5 years. Okay. And then Claire Oakes, another Bama grad. And I guess there's 3 things we talk about with Claire Oakes. We talk about money, and we talk about power, and we talk about sexuality. And of course, we obviously talk about librarians, because that's what we're talking about anyway. It started off about money, right? Budgets. And the library board made a request. The request was denied, or at least part of the request was denied. And then it just sort of turns into, then it becomes over a book, which we still have, and I have it up front. And this picture was taken, well, let me back up, because there's lots of evidence, but there's also lots of evidence missing. And as it's hard to get a full picture, and so I'm not here to tell you the full picture. I'm here to sort of tell you that there was controversy. And Claire Oakes defended The Joy of Sex, as I think most librarians would, that it should be in the collection, it should remain in the collection. And it was the city administration, or Mayor Nix, who it's claimed to have said it shouldn't be in the library. And so a court battle ensued. And what I think is most important, and these are just some photographs, this is a photograph of the staff this was 1978. And all I can tell you, because I wasn't here, and I've only read probably most of the things you've read, the Calvin Trillin article and the Fairhope Courier articles, but what I noticed, or what became quickly evident to me, was that despite all the drama of the court battle, and the board, her library board being replaced by another board, is she was still a librarian. And this is, oh, she's not here. I had a picture of someone who I was hoping would come tonight. But anyway, so again, consummate professional, right? So after all that drama, we had Nina King Shelley. And I think she seemed like the right person to right the ship. But she wasn't here for too long either. She was here for about 4 years, I think. Let's see. These are just some shots of some friends, because you all know about the library friends. I know. And we love them. I just love this picture. I came across this just recently. She's just sitting there you know, playing guitar with their kid, with the children's program. I don't know, that just seems to me too cool. And this is the grand plans for the new library and for the Civic Center over in the Delchamps. Delchamps, am I right on that? Okay, yeah, the old Delchamps. You can see the library has, it looks like a really big space, but it gets outgrown quickly. And of course, then Betty Sudduth is hired. And I call her the queen of the double move, because she was here when, in 1983, when we said, hey, let's move to the new building first. I like this picture because it's a magnifier. And let's see, Claire Oakes, was it Frances Black? Let me get my order correct. Betty also was the first to introduce books on tape, which I know it sounds like, whoa, my gosh, but they were huge. And Claire Oakes, during Claire Oakes' time, first copy machine. And Frances Black was the first to offer a film series. So, you know, these are things that, you know, we think about media now, and I know it sounds very archaic, but this was stuff that, you know, people were clamoring for, including like 16mm films that we were checking out. Or we the librarians. This is just Betty at her desk, and this is just a little graphic that somebody drew out for the library lines, which is a column that was written like, I don't think it was every week, but it was certainly a lot. And for Marie Howland kind of started it, and it wasn't called Library Lines, but the librarian would have a column of some kind or another talking about what's happening at the library, whether it was trivial or whether it was business or whether it was programming. They are well represented, and so not only are they librarians, but they're also writers. I came across this cool thing that Betty was like reading books, and she finally, she's not here tonight, I miss her. She learned how to sail reading books and thought it was crazy that she bought a sailboat. Okay, so this is just some shots of the new library. I'm sorry, the new library is in the old library. So these are some shots just of, this is an agreement, they signed the first agreement with Faulkner State Community College, which is now Coastal Alabama, on pairing up and trying to offer services to students, which we still do. This is my coworker Pam McRae, circa 1985. And this is Susan DeMert, circa 1988, both still working here. This is Jane, and there's some other, lots of familiar faces in there as well. And this was during an event for Anna Braun when she came back in the 90s. And there's Mayor Nix and Betty there. And this is, pulling out all the stops and recruiting children to get the new library built. Librarians, no shame either. Do what we can. Do what we have to. And so, yeah. So I never saw this building, so maybe this building is familiar to all of you. Donnie built a wonderful display that's in the reference area in the big colony room that's kind of a tribute to the Sherman Pecan facility, so make sure you look at that too. So this is the big groundbreaking. This was in 2005? 2005, yeah. Oops, that blank slide. So this is just a grant with, this is Ilse Creek and this is Betty. And I love this picture because when you walk in the library, you see that stairway, but that's that stairway under construction with several of the staff here. Really cool. And of course, the hard hats, it's girls' night out, so I mean, hard hats. I'm sure nobody's wearing a hard hat out there. And this is a shot, too, of staff. It's Tamara and Ilse. I'm sorry, Tamara and Betty and Carol Kaiser. That's in the children's department for folks who don't wander over there. For folks who don't wander over there, go ahead and wander over there. Check it out. It's beautiful. So this is Ilse Creek. She took over shortly after Betty retired and shortly after we moved into the library. And the most important decision she made was to hire me. I'm kidding. We had a very odd interview, and I'll just share it with you because it's funny. And it could be that she's a genius and was testing my knowledge, but I had a background in wine, in the wine business, and so she was, she wanted to talk about wine. So we spent like 15 minutes talking about, California Chardonnays. And I don't know if that got me the job or not, but apparently I carried my own part of the conversation. So anyway, it was cool because I think I was here at the library when they first hired her too. So the board officially made their decision, so that was kind of cool. She was the first, shared with me the news, the first person, so that was kind of cool. And so this is just a little flashback to our staff. Right around shortly after the library opened. The library opened in January of 2007. And then our present director. I love these shots. These are like glamour shots. I think it's cool. It was taken for the Mobile Bay Monthly, and this one here was. And so she's got Tamara was a children's librarian then. Let me make sure I quantify that. And I just kind of think it's cool that she's got like a Harry Potter, I mean, can't get any more cooler than that. And this is just a proclamation for I think it's either National Library Week or Friends of the Library Week. So there's some volunteers and lots of Friends members and of course the mayor. And this is a recent staff. Back in 2015, we won a gold award for our services and programming from the Alabama Library Association. So we were all celebrating here with our award. Picture with the new mayor getting her library card. And apparently that's it. So I don't know. Yeah, thank you. I tried to touch every librarian that I felt like had an impact here. I know there were lots more that probably that I could have touched on more or longer. I mean, heck, I could have done a whole program on Marie Howland or any of the librarians that were here earlier. I mean, I could have done a whole program on Claire Oakes, but I wanted to give people a full picture and let them know what a great resource we have and what we have in terms of our archive and our collection that we really look forward to digitizing at some point. So, because the Single Tax Corporation just digitized their documents, so we would love to do the same.